Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Jacqueline Newton, and I'm a co-chair of this boundary review study with my partner, Trustee Donna Danelli. We're here tonight, meeting number 5, with the Boundary Review Committee for the Glenview-Maplehurst Boundary Study. As in our practice, we would like to start with the land acknowledgement, and over to my colleague, Superintendent Nick Frankich.
Thanks, Jackie. Alton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaron, the Haudenosaunee and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the 4 directions: land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walk before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us.
Thank you, Nick. Tonight we'll be running through the agenda, and we will be addressing the following items. Part 1 are some housekeeping items to keep the public in the know. Part 2 is a review of public meeting and feedback. Part 3 will be the final review of options, led by a discussion, and Part 4 are the next steps following this evening. So on to Part 1 and the housekeeping items for today's meeting. Today's goal is to discuss the public meeting and review the feedback, to identify final option or options to present to the Boundary Review Steering Committee, and to go over the next steps. The BRC meeting notes, as always, can be found on our website, as that's where they're posted on the web page, and the Boundary Review meeting minutes from number 4, which was held January 31st, are currently located there for all to see. What's new? An update to the study webpage. The following information is now available on the study website from the February 2nd public consultation meeting. There's a copy of the slide presentation that we used, and there's a link to the live stream YouTube video should you like to watch that video again. The link to the public feedback form was closed to the public at noon on Thursday, February the 9th. And after this meeting, this presentation, as always, and the feedback will also be made available online. The themes that came out of the submitted live stream questions on February 2nd included questions regarding the process, the purpose of the review to relieve enrollment pressure at Glenview Public School, the next steps including reviewing feedback from the Boundary Review Committee, the Boundary Review Steering Committee presenting a preferred option or options to the director and the senior team, and a final option to be presented to the Board of Trustees for approval at a future board meeting, along with the delegation process. Before and after care availability for students being moved, the YMCA is aware of this particular boundary review and changes. The YMCA will be sending a memo to the Glenview students before and after school families to determine how many families are enrolled at Glenview Public School who would like this care provided at Maplehurst Public School. Additional space at Maplehurst Public School may be required, and the YMCA, with all our boundary studies, is on board with those pieces. Other themes that came out of the submitted live stream questions on February 2nd required a support for students who would be switching schools. Questions regarding student mental health and well-being in context with the pandemic and the virtual meeting. As part of the School Boundary Review Administrative Procedure, an integration committee will plan for and implement a positive integration of students and staff affected by the boundary decision and relocation into a new school environment. The Family of School Superintendent of Education would act as the chair of the integration committee. The 2 principal teams would also be involved. Some details to consider to administer a healthy integration include team and community building activities, grouping of students that move from Glenview Public School into the same class or have a buddy with them as they move forward in September, and teacher and school administration involvement. Other questions that came out in terms of a theme are out of area transfers, which was historically known as optional attendance. Questions regarding the ability to remain at Glenview Public School if they are impacted by the new boundary. The board encourages students to attend their designated school, but there is a process that can be followed for considering an out of area transfer. These requests, it's the process where students can apply to attend a school other than the school designated for their area of residence. One of the requirements that will allow a student to attend a school that is not their designated school is if there is enough space at the school to accommodate them. The purpose of this study is to alleviate accommodation pressures at Glenview Public School, so out-of-area transfer requests will not be fulfilled by this school. As for Maplehurst, this will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, subject to availability of space. Another theme that came out of submitted live stream questions included a legacy exemption, what previously has been known as grandfathering or grandparenting. Questions regarding who's eligible for legacy exemption if impacted by boundary changes are as follows. All the options 1 to 13 were presented to date have assumed the following. September 2023 implementation of the new boundaries, that the current grade 5 English students will not be impacted. They will remain at their current school for grade 6. Consideration may be given to extenuating the exemption to beyond current grade 5 students. Specific questions centering around the zones included zones A and B moving and zone E divisions. The administrative procedure review met the following timelines, and where we are this evening is the boundary review steering committee meeting on February the 13th, which we've had in person prior to tonight's meeting start. And this boundary review committee meeting, which is in person for our parents on the boundary review committee and is live streamed for observers. We then will move to February 21st, reporting to our administrative council, which includes our senior team and director. A notification of proposed options to the affected community will occur the February 20th a week. Board meeting for the Glenview Maplehurst recommended options for information will be March the 1st, and then for action and approval by the board on March 22nd. And following that, a notification of the decision will be emailed and posted to affected communities and families after board approval. And now we're on to part 2. The online survey summary outlined the feedback from attendees and members of the public, and they had access to the information feedback form. The form asked for the community's feedback on the options presented. The feedback portal closed at noon on Thursday, February 9th, and the feedback timeline from Thursday, February 2nd to noon on Thursday, the 9th, garnished a total of 62 responses. Some questions were multiple choice. Feedback that has been collated for this evening and will be presented to the Boundary Review Committee are as follows. And I turn this over now to our Superintendent, Nick Frankovich, and Mitch Dundee on our planning team.
Thanks, Jackie. As we look at the public feedback, and we want to thank the community for an abundance of feedback throughout the process. Our planning department put together a little area heat map for the responses. And in our heat map, you'll see that zones A and B collectively, we had 16% of the respondents from this area. For zones C and D, we had 28% of the respondents from these areas. Zone F made up 20% of our responses. Zone E, 15% of our responses. Zone G and H combined were at 18% of the responses, and the balance were representative of less than 2%. When we looked at it by option, the criteria for option 3, zones that are moving in this scenario, which would be A, B, and E, provided an average ranking of under 3 to meeting the criteria. And the remaining zones, C, D, F, G, and H, provided an average ranking above 4 to meeting the criteria. For option 10, the zones that are moving in this option which would be A, B, E, A, and F, provided an average ranking of under 3 to meeting the criteria. And the zones that are not moving in this option, which would be C, D, E, B, G, and H, provided rankings that were above 3. The criteria for option 11, when we looked at that feedback, the zones moving in this option, which are A, B, E, A, C, and D, and zone G that is not moving, those zones provided an average ranking of under 3, whereas zones that are not moving in this option, which are F, E, B, and H, provided an average ranking above 3. Out of our feedback, we had 61 from English program. We had 1 from French immersion and 1 not in the school system. The schools the students are attending, 58 came from Glenview, 4 from Maplehurst, and 1 from Aldershot High School. And taking a look at this graph, we had 32 students represented in the feedback are in the kindergarten grades. 40 students are in grades 1 to 3, our primary grades, and 17 students are in grades 4 to 6, with 3 students being in grade 7 or above. The total, as you would notice, is greater than 100% as a result of families with multiple children. And for the next part of the feedback, I'll turn it over to Mitchell.
Thanks, Nick. So the next few slides will go over the criteria ranking portion, where we asked the community to rate the criteria based off of how well, or I guess in this slide, how valuable it is to them, or the priority of it. Next slide, sure. So this is option 3. You can see it's basically rated 3, average 3, a little higher than 3 across the board, with the top 3 criteria being student experience, viability of programs, and stable long-term boundaries. Next slide. Here we have option 10. The average ratings a little lower per each criteria, with the viability of programs being number 1, balance of enrollments between the schools being number 2, and proximity of the schools being number 3, the top 3 rated criteria. And option 11, again, this similar rating, with the top 3 being viability of programs, balance of enrollment schools, and efficient use of portable and port packs. So when we compare the 3, and what we did see is that during the feedback responses, there was a clear, there's a higher rating for one of the options above the other, which is option 3. Again, based off of different areas that were filling out the survey and so forth. That just kind of is displayed in this one with an average rating of 3 or higher for all the options. So in the written feedback portion of the feedback form, some common themes that we found were distance to school, or distance from the home to the school, and walkability to the school. Like the subpoint being availability to allow the students to ride or bike or to walk to school. The impact of COVID-19 on mental health and the students changing schools, being removed from established neighborhoods and friendships, or issues with the phasing of students, so legacy exemptions, excluding students from moving, excluding current students from moving from the boundary review is one of the common themes, excluding older/established neighborhoods from being removed, concern over preferential treatment for Zone E was a lesser concern. And these themes are ranked from 1 to 8 based off of how frequent they occurred in the feedback or how often they were brought up. So the later numbers were brought up less. Concerns over school congestion during entry and dismissal, minimize the number of portables on each site, and the data available from the community, or available to the community to study and develop their own options. These were just themes as well. So the conclusions we got from that were basically all the options had an average rating of 3 or more. The overwhelming majority of the responses were from Glenview, as that we saw. It was, I think we had 4 from Maplehurst. The location of parent responses was the impact on the results. Not so much a bias, but it would skew the data towards more of a Glenview lens than it would a Maplehurst lens, just based off of the amount of responses we got from each school. And the criteria ranking ended up being do you like this option versus that option, rather than how well does this criteria meet that option, which is something that we can improve on future reviews. Kind of an oversight on my part, not realizing that people would just rank the option solely based off of whether they like it or not. The sizable portion of the written feedback were just whether or not they would be moved or not. If they weren't being moved, they would like the option. If they were being moved, they would typically just write that. The rest of them were shown in the feedback, common themes. And like Nick said, our superintendent, the feedback was primarily from F, C, E, and H zones. Part 3. Jackie?
Thank you very much, Mitch and Nick, for those pieces. Now we would like to have a review of the options through part 3. And I invite our planning department, Michelle DeGuire, to go through those for us.
Okay. Option 3, A, B, and E will be directed to Maplehurst, and zones C, D, E, G, and H will remain at Glenview. In this option, approximately 75 students will be directed to Maplehurst. For transportation, if you live below Plains Road, the walking routes will remain as is. For those students that reside north of Plains Road in Zone E, instead of walking to Glenview, they'll be redirected at a further distance to Maplehurst. As you can see at Glenview, for the next 5 years, if current trends remain stable, for the next 5 years and beyond, Glenview will require 3 to 4 portables. Maplehurst, for at least the first 5 years, will not require portables until 2028. And afterward, once development of all the shop corners comes in, other actions will be required. Option 10, zones A, B, E, A, and F will be directed to Maplehurst. Zones C, D, E, B, G, and H will remain at Glenview. This option has approximately 80 students being redirected to Maplehurst. Under this option, the walking boundary, as it currently is now, will remain the same. So those students in Zone E and H will still be able to walk to Glenview. And again, future impact for the first 5 years, Glenview would require 2 to 3 portables and eventually have to move up to 4 to 5 portables. Maplehurst will not require portables in the immediate future, but will slowly increase to 3 to 5 portables, and then when construction of new development does fill in, other alternate actions will be required. Option 11, zones A, B, C, and D, EA will be directed to Maplehurst, and zones EB, F, G, and H will remain at Glenview. This option moves approximately 90 students to Maplehurst. Again, for transportation, pretty much if you're walking to Glenview, you'll continue to walk to Glenview. And if you're eligible for transportation, you'll still be eligible for transportation, whether it's to Maplehurst or Glenview, that depends on which zone you live in. Again, for option 11, in the near future, it is projected that Glenview will require 2 to 3 portables, and then in the longer term will require approximately 4 portables. Maplehurst in the immediate future will not require portables, but it'll eventually grow with the construction of Aldershot corners, and then by 2030 some action will be required.
Great, thank you very much, Michelle. So in reviewing the boundaries on the 3 options as well as the feedback, we now turn it over to our boundary review committee, who will analyze the 3 options and generate some discussion. We will give them 20 minutes to have the dialogue, and then we'll ask for their thoughts on a Jamboard link, which we will record after 20 minutes. Thank you.
Options.
Go ahead, Christine. You're closest to the mic.
Okay. I think the input that was provided was good. It was informative. I don't think I think Mitchell pointed out that I'm not sure a lot of the comments maybe provided a community-wide perspective on which of the options met certain criteria or didn't meet certain criteria. So it was clear that the comments were being made based on where someone was living, which I think was expected. But I think speaking on behalf of the group, I'm not sure any new information was gleaned from the input that we received. But again, it was good input to get. It was consistent to what we've received in the past. That being said, I think at our last meeting, we'd asked the non-parent reps on the committee for your input. And I think the response we got was the non-parent reps, the board reps on this committee were waiting to get the parental and the community feedback before thoughts were communicated. So I think we're interested in your thoughts on the parent input.
I can start. Over the past few weeks, I've been drawn to option 11. Like, that is the one that I liked. I think it was a healthy number of students moving. But then looking at the feedback and seeing that option 3 was popular among the community, it's, although sending fewer students, it is still a large enough of a group where the students will see familiar faces during that transition. And so those are the 2 that I look at. I really, option 10 isn't drawing me in. So I'm still at 11 as the one that I've been considering for the past few weeks. But based on the feedback, I can definitely support option 3 as well.
I can go next to you, like, and I'm very much along the same way. I think this is about February to 11. I think about February to 3, just because looking at the maps, it's neater and tidier for me. It's a little easier to understand. I think either one is a good option, and a case could be made to support either 3 or 11. 10 doesn't.
Mish, did you want to weigh in?
Same, yeah, pick me up here. Basically the same opinion as Donna. I appreciate the tidiness, if that's the word to use, of option 3, but
there's only a certain amount of students moving in that one. Michelle will get to that. That there's more students moving in 11, and it potentially pushes out the issue, gives us a little more breathing room. Yeah, that's all I can say about that.
Okay, Michelle?
I'd consider it 3 and 11 again. 10 doesn't really do it for me. I debate between 3 and 11 in that, again, I like the boundaries. For 3, we do move 75 students. But for me, I like 11 because it keeps the students that are walking to Glenview, walking to Glenview with their established patterns. And it gives you a little more room, I believe, from memory, into a little more wiggle room in Glenview. Again, I think 3 and 11 are both very viable options.
Just jumping in,
Yeah.
Tim here, for those that can't tell who's on the phone. We did look at 3 and 11 too as two of the, I think, options we liked or sort of preferred. When we looked at 11, we also wondered about, it puts a very fast crunch on Maplehurst, which puts a lot of dependency on timing. And does that, pushed by a year or two, does that take any material difference? Or in your experience from capital funding, you're riding Glenview at 90% all the way through, and if it doesn't happen, does it delay, the ability to get it without showing 2 schools running at near full capacity for a duration of time?
So right now, that hump or that increase is based on what we perceive development will be coming in. It can be, more than likely it will be delayed. So it's not a guarantee happen. But when it does, we can put a better viable case when we do not have room in schools, right? When there is that pressure.
So bust is worse than 2 balances. Like I guess sort of right, like if the projections in terms of capital funding, which ultimately I think what we have acknowledged is going to happen at some point. Yeah. The other question I think we had when we looked at option 3 was you're leaving not a lot of wiggle room for what could be more tear down and rebuilds south of Plains Road. So when you look at, G&H, there's still a lot of houses that look like they're going to be turned over in the next 5 years. And option 3, while you show you're dropping to 3 portables, that's based on like less than 10 student differential. Is there any concerns that 3 is just riding it too close to at capacity given projections, or?
Again, that's why personally I favored 11 over 3. It gave us a little more wiggle room, but again, we do not have that development in yet, so we don't know. And when it comes,
coming out of tonight, are we is it a possibility that we can say 3 or 11 and it moves forward that way? Like it sounds like it's, I don't want to say unanimous because I don't want to speak for everybody, but 10 seems like it's kind of off the table. So is it that we move forward with 3 and 11? I know we sort of had that discussion, like, do we need to endorse only one option because there's 2 that could work, right?
You can vouch, and say, from your studies and what you see, here are the 2 options we'd like you to consider. You turn that then over to the Boundary Review Steering Committee, and they would then weigh the feedback from what you're suggesting and select the one that they think that the director and the board should endorse. So you are not tied to making one recommendation. You can certainly put forward 2 options if you like. I mean, you can put 3 forward if you like as well, but if you have some understanding that one option might not be as viable as another, I think what you have to be prepared for is that you're comfortable living with whatever you suggest. And then Donna?
And eventually this will come to the trustees. The trustees will be more voting on it. And I know the question that we asked there is, can you live with either 3 or 11 being chosen? I know as a trustee, I'll have to ask myself, this may not be my ideal. The 2 questions I ask, can I live with it? can I publicly support it? And that's what I think the trustees will be looking for from you. Can you live with, can you publicly support either 3 or 11?
And if we did recommend one, you would still consider all three options either way at the further committee, right? So then we recommend you're gonna still look at all options and
Yes.
make the best decision based on the assignment,
Yes.
which is to the vote of the trustees.
I think one thing that we discussed that I just wanted to bring up, and I'm sure it's obvious to everyone, is that while option 3 was heavily favored by the respondents, I think we have to be aware that there was probably more people responding to this survey that weren't in zone E, and that's why the average for option 3 was much higher than the other two. So just, that's one thing that at first glance, it's okay, this is heavily favored by the respondents, but then when you consider where people are living, then that kind of almost skews the results.
And I think that was disappointing, right? And in terms of seeking the feedback, and that's why Mitch has suggested on future bound reviews, because we do bound reviews a lot, that we might reword that question, but you always have that NIMBY effect, right? Not my backyard. So I'm happy with whatever you suggest, as long as it doesn't impact me. And boundary reviews are about, like, the criteria is that we want to create all schools that are viable, and that we want to, you know, the proximity to schools and a healthy environment, a good cohort piece, and obviously fiscal responsibility too. Okay, Mitch, you're up.
Bring up the slides that show the rating of each, not the rating of the criteria for each option, and which area preferred each option, right? So that's going to the point you brought up there, that the areas that are impacted are showing red or yellow. Clearly not involving, but rating is lower.
I'm wondering, Mitch, on the Jamboard, if you could just start to put some of these points of consideration. So on the option 3, it would be that might be skewed in the sense of overrepresentation from folks that would be impacted by the other two. Okay? Just kind of keep it running.
I think the parent reps have gone into this being mindful of all the criteria, but I think we've tried to keep the weightings, or I think we maybe removed the element of weighting, because when it came to the criteria, we tried to treat all the criteria the same. But is there any criteria that the steering committee or any further groups that would be assessing these options would be weighting more heavily against other criteria, or are you taking the same, would you be taking the same sort of approach where the weightings are not there?
Donna?
Every boundary review is different, and in every boundary review, different criteria tend to rise to the top. So I tend to, when it comes to that, I'll be honest with you, I sit back and listen to what the community reps are saying, because you know me really, I don't.
For me, just as in school programs, Nick and I work in school programs areas, right? For us, it's like we want to ensure there's a viable program at both schools. So, you know, that, for example, I'm not saying this case necessarily, but is there, are there healthy numbers in each grade, or are you looking at every grade split moving up in order to stay viable? We find that for teaching, when you can have teaching teams for each grade as opposed to, you know, a teacher's trying to teach grade 1 and grade 2, and that's all you have. So the viability means actually having more balance or more students in each grade. Actually prevent it generates a livelihood in a grade or a primary division, if you like, than if it's so skewed. If you have a school that's so skewed one way or another in terms of a grade, then the viability sometimes of the student experience gets more limited. Not saying that splits are bad, they're fine, but for a child to have a split every year in order to just keep our school open is an issue in itself. So I would say I tend to look at the viability of the program both from a student's point of view and a staff point of view. So if each school wants to have music and clubs and all this other stuff, when you can only ask, and you only have 10 teachers in a school, that's a lot to ask 10 teachers versus if you have 15 or more, or, you know, it balances out. So in this case, I'm sure you have less staff at one school, more staff at another. The workload gets pretty heavy in terms of co-curricular, let alone the viability of the program. That's just my lens, though.
So I think that was one thing that we were struggling with, and I think that was what a few of the points we're getting at in terms of the data that was provided. We don't know. Like, in the worst case scenario, what if all the 75 students in option 3 are actually going into grade 6 and they don't get moved? So we didn't have the breakdown on a grade by grade basis. So we really I don't think we ever fully understood the viability aspect.
Between 3 and 11, you have 75 and 90, is that 50? You're gonna make any cohort difference in how it might play out into the actual disbursement of kids. If you took 75 out, is it just really not gonna make a difference because you're doing the same number of classrooms? It depends on where the bubble is, right?
Yeah.
I know which zone I live in, and I can tell you they're all now early high school, and unlikely to turn over in the next 5 years, which means my zone likely to, you know,
Right.
that's just my own personal knowledge, right? So yeah, we're, you know, looking at those different actual impacts of the number of kids to that point is hard.
Mitch, on the long-term accommodation study, or the projections that you've just done for elementary schools at the same time for next year for all 105 schools, so a little busy over here. Do we have an idea of how many students, or Michelle, how many students are in each grade? That could be Michelle. Okay.
I don't have off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But I can tell you from looking at Glenview's numbers, you're having smaller cohorts graduating, but larger cohorts entering. So that tells me that we're having younger kids. It's a growing school.
Yeah, that's what we see.
Yeah.
2 to 5 JK classes over a 2-year span, right? You just saw it. And then has to carry all the way through.
And the JK registrations at Glenview have been higher for this coming September at this point of the year than historically.
Yeah, we asked for an update today, and they're still trending higher than previous years.
And planning does look at the birth rates. We do get regional data. And by all indications, the next few years are higher than previous 5 years.
But I would tell you that if you took 75 kids out, they're all likely going to fall in the roughly JDK to 4 range at this point, because the 5s and 6 are the older groups with smaller bubbles. So yeah. It's going to be meaningful. That's the day. It should be meaningful distribution.
Yeah, that's good. I want to throw the Jamboard up, maybe, Mitch, sorry. To throw it, I'm sorry, Michelle, if you throw it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got it right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so far on option 3. So on option 3, so far what we're hearing, is there's a concern if the students will actually move based on the grade. So we answered a little bit of that. I noticed that a bulk of new students coming in are in the primary, junior, kindergarten range. That maybe, okay, yeah, that the representation for the feedback was overrepresented. And so hence the popularity or choice, not that we're supposed to be voting on a feedback form, but that might skew some of the thinking. And that option 3 tends to be the most popular in the community, again, recognizing that other neighborhoods were underrepresented in their feedback. That maybe the writing might be too close to the capacity. So if we move, like, are we going to find that we're over the top before we even get started? And that there would not be much wiggle room for what would be rebuilds in the south, and that the staff is split between options 3 and 11. So that's what we're hearing. So is there anything else that you would say for option 3 that you would want Mitch to put down on the GM board for thought?
Option 3 is the lowest number of children that I think.
Sorry?
Option 3 is the lowest number.
Yes, option 3 is the lowest number.
So 75.
Yeah, 75, so that is lower. What is it that you like about option 3?
We all said like some tiny boundaries.
Yeah.
Okay,
You know, like clean.
so putting natural
Sense of
boundaries.
community, sense of connectedness, it's
Yeah.
a natural boundary that
Yeah.
seems to make
We're not
sense.
dividing these
Which was
up.
something that was discussed extensively.
Okay, so yeah, school boundaries, neighborhood boundaries are natural, it's a natural sense of community. Definitely a walk to, right, for the most part, that maintains its walk, you've said that. Other pieces?
Option 3 still leaves Glenview at over 100% occupancy.
Yes,
Or capacity.
yeah, so option 3 is still over 100% capacity. Until what year? When does it move?
It doesn't.
It does.
It
always-
doesn't.
It's always.
So
That's
it's
what I'm
always
saying,
gonna-
riding that, like,
So it's always gonna be full at the end,
It's always over.
It's
100.
always over, okay. Okay. Anything else you'd like noted?
I think the other thing we liked about option 3, was the boundaries. I think that a few parents commented it's unfair that we're allowing a split in option in zone E, where we didn't allow a split in zone H. So
Yeah.
from that perspective, it's just.
You're not breaking up any existing boundaries, you're just allocating them differently.
Okay, so there's no splitting of boundaries or neighborhoods, I guess you would say. I know the word boundary and boundaries go, yes, but the neighborhood stays intact, okay.
When we talk about option 11, you are creating a very clear community boundary for the future.
Okay, so if we
It's
jump
in the
to,
future, you put a line right down the middle of the street, you're gonna have one side of the street going here, and one side of the street goes here.
okay,
And you'll have large population of people looking at each other going in different directions.
Well, the boundary for option 11, it's down, so if you have a Cook, I believe it's Cook, address, you're going to one school. We're not splitting it down the center, both sides will go,
Okay, so you have two, but this.
right? It's like going to the back, depending on where
That's where we're seeing
addresses
the
are.
numbers.
So it's
Yeah,
the back
gonna
here.
be
It's always
close to free.
people.
Yeah.
That's why some people are asking questions, what's the address gonna be after development versus pre-development stuff,
Yeah.
because if it changes, it might change.
do we wanna jump to 11, do you wanna talk about 10? On what you like or don't like about 10? Or don't wanna discuss it at all? I mean, clearly the feedback didn't favor 10. And I guess as a committee, you would endorse that?
I think what we did like about 10, if we were considering a split, we had left established neighborhood and then the newer neighborhood. Most of which would have residents that would already have a sense that they might not be going to Glenview. So I think that's what we liked about that split in option 10, that I guess it was more fair to the established neighborhood essentially.
So established neighborhood is there, newcomers to the area would recognize that they wouldn't have access to Glenview, okay. Anything else for 10?
I think the other thing that was good about 10 was that there was a lot of feedback from parents in zone So in C and D, that there is an established habit of biking or walking to school. So that would be maintained in option 10.
So the healthy walking and biking would be maintained just instead of using bus and transportation. Alma?
Option 10 had the shortest longevity plans.
Okay.
Right, so Glenview would exceed capacity by the earliest.
So we'd be back at this in a relatively short time.
Yeah, it wouldn't be stable long-term boundary based on that. That is the stable.
And then to the exclusion of F, I think was there some feedback on that about how that neighborhood kind of, you know, some of the kids might get dropped off in a G zone and then continue on. So they sort of consider themselves integrated into that G and almost H zone too. So excluding that maybe not ideal.
Did you capture that one? Thanks.
I would say for option 11, it's a similar thing, though. You would say that C and D naturally go across to G and walk across, which I know lots of them do. So Northern F comes into G, and I do know lots of kids do come in and walk and bike across from there. C and D does come across the street because there's the crossing lane important, more along that like go across and meet, and they all go along council together.
Right. Yeah. So either way, right? Yeah.
So just
We're
look at
gonna
option
either way.
11, you are potentially taking away some walkability, maybe not identified yet, but it's actually happening.
Okay, so option 11 is impacting some walkability.
Potential walkability.
Potential walkability.
Yeah.
Okay, and we also have 11. The what is the bump? Okay,
Population.
the bump, okay. The bump is based on develop. Okay, is that a P or a B there, Mitch? Those are my eyes are firing. Okay, thank you, Elma. The bump is based on development that we are coming at some point. Okay, all right. That's all right.
That's just basically saying the Maplehurst goes from no portables to completely out of capacity in
Yeah.
about a 12-month period.
Right.
So if there's no ramp up here, it's we're gonna tip over almost over.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Other points of option 11?
If there's any other development, you could push Maplehurst over earlier. Then you can bring things in sooner. And you can see it for 2028. Complete crisis, which means you're gonna be busts, like, you know, it's according to this, you'll be red.
Yes.
So development.
Development timing can have a bigger impact on. That's gonna have thoughts.
I feel like this jam board is probably very similar to the one from.
Previous week.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The previous week, yeah. Is it possible to pull up the previous week's June board? Which just taking care. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Anybody want to apply for principal or VP? In this spare time.
I saw that social media post today. I thought it was right there. See the social media post like that from the school board.
Yeah, we're getting there about Twitter and social media about using
odd to
LinkedIn.
advertise for a principal on.
You speak French?
No.
How is the concept?
You can
arrange an interview tomorrow.
Yeah, Well, back in the day, they used to post all those jobs in the Globe and Mail, right? So you'd frantically look in the back of the Globe and Mail, so I guess we're getting up to speed in our recruitment, looking at social media as an avenue. And we'd love to attract people from outside too, right, that don't live in the neighborhood necessarily, but are looking to come to Halton too, and bring their families. Okay, so from our last meeting, thank you very much. So if we go to option, oh boy, can we pull this bigger? Is it possible to zoom beyond 100%? A little bit more even? Yeah. Okay, so we said option 3 had fewer displaced students when compared to option 8, so that's option 8's off the table. Less distribution of future and recent growth between both schools. Zone E is unknown timing of development, which I think we've raised before. And then option 3 versus 8, we don't pay attention to that because we're done with that. And portable infrastructure is at Glenview already.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's true. We're already maxed at the portables at Glenview, right? So that.
The investment has already been there, so maybe that's an important part.
We're saying that was a positive.
Yeah,
that's
Already
positive.
there, the kids
They're
are used
already
to
there.
it, they see it, they've adapted the green space.
So can we add, copy that post-it note
No
then,
footprint
Mitch,
to
to
remove.
this month, this week's? That the portable infrastructure is at Glenview already, it's already established.
Don't want to add more, but people are already used, what we were saying, people are already used to it.
Yeah.
It's been custom now for,
So
they've
it's,
adjusted their
yeah,
market
you're not
size,
paying
it's
money
not
to
stable.
move them on or off.
Soccer
and
field's already
it's-
gone.
yeah. The chalets are already established. Yes, chalets and cottages.
It's really lovely.
It's true. Okay, if the notes from whether you're, if you'd like this carried over or not, option 10 was there's no portable to Maplehurst. Walkability, what would the impact of F to Glenview and HB to Maplehurst be? So the question of walkability again. Too much risks at Glenview and not enough balance in terms of their population.
Yes.
And students in HB can walk to Maplehurst. So rather than move them, then that's an issue. Okay. And then option 11, if the balance is not met at Glenview, they will be running higher class sizes. You can't add more portables. So you are looking at after grade 3, if the classes for grade 4, 5, and 6 would be larger. And then EB, you put the risk of issues to Maplehurst in the longer run, dependent on the timing of development, which you did mention. So those were from last week's as well. 2 weeks ago. Go back to today's. So this note that's hanging there, portable infrastructure as at Glenview already. Goes to 11, I think, doesn't it?
Three.
No,
Three. Okay.
That's just correct.
Yeah, that's okay. Thanks. Thanks, Michelle.
Any others we want to bring over?
Yeah, so option 3, because it keeps 3/4 portables all the way through the existence. It
Yeah.
just means no more change in
That's
Glenview
interesting.
conditions. We'd like to add the potential option.
Okay. Anything else?
Three is a good option both for how I see it, both balancing the board's need to be fiscally responsible and the viability of programs at Glenview with the community feedback around kind of wanting to minimize the amount of the community feedback. The goal is around student experience, right?
Right.
Just limiting. So to me, 3 is the best balance of those two, I guess, dichotomies, if you will.
Okay. Okay. Did you catch that, Mitch?
I don't think criteria, they didn't catch all the criteria they mentioned too.
Yeah.
Student experience and fiscal responsibility.
Yeah, and viability of programs, right?
Okay.
Because the portables are already there,
Right.
right? The money has already been spent. The students are comfortable and familiar with it. But it
Yeah.
sounds like the community parents based on, was it 78 respondents? 62, sorry, have essentially indicated that their primary, their number one was student experience. Right, and option 3 is the least amount of kids. So that meets that objective.
Sorry, my last name is the student experience is responsibility and responsibility.
Program viability?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts that you would like to add? Ponderings?
The other thing I would say is if you do any other option besides option 3, is you create potential uncertainty for the future for both of these, because we are talking about different divisions, whereas option 3, there's little to no surprise development going to happen in the future, which means Glenview is likely going to stay as it is. It's a very small community-based school for a long period of time. You don't see where else the expansion can come from in option 3. So it just puts all the uncertainty in one spot instead of potentially splitting it out.
Any other thoughts? So having gone through this exercise, is there an option that you would be more favorable to, or?
I would recommend going with 3 and then 11 myself. So I would start with 3 as my personal recommended option versus, and then 11 secondary, but would support and could justify and speak publicly about why and defend each option holistically and wholly. So I could live with both and could defend both options as viable outcomes for the community as the parameters outlined.
Okay. Christina, is that what you feel as well?
Yep.
Yeah. Tanya?
Yeah,
Same?
ditto.
So a stronger advocate for 3, but could live with 11.
Yeah.
Tim?
Is trustee Diodati on? I'm just curious whether he was
No,
here.
he's just not able to come tonight. Yeah.
So I was going to see if he had any thoughts or opinions
Yeah.
on the final decision.
He'll have those decisions as it comes through, right? Okay, so thank you very much. I know a lot of homework and a lot of thinking, and I know you've been listening to your community really well too, and getting the ears for us. So thank you for that. So the next steps for upcoming meeting, like what happens now, basically. So what we do now is we will take your information, we will share that with the Boundary Review Steering Committee, who will then make a notification of recommended option to the community, having said 3 as a preferred and 11 as a secondary that you could live with. And then we present that draft report to what we call a mid-council. And that is the director and all of the superintendents for all the areas and our corporate side. And they will endorse what option they would like to see brought forward to the board meeting. So the VRSC writes the report with the director or AC's approval, and we present it to the Board of Trustees. On March the 1st, it's presented for information. So it will be in its final form in an attachment with the board packages. And the BRC will be sent a copy of that prior to the board meeting, so you'll have that in hand. March 22nd is when the Board of Trustees will make the decision. And then there also will be opportunities for the community to delegate the board at both meetings. What delegating means is that anybody from the community can ask to delegate the board on this issue. They usually are given 3 to 5 minutes to do their presentation. If the trustees have any questions for that delegate, they would ask them. If they have no questions, they would say, thank you very much for presenting tonight. And that would all happen before a final vote would go down. So people from the public can delegate both on the first when it's just hits the table as an information item. And again, they could choose to come on the 22nd. Usually, our organizer of, which is Director Ennis's executive assistant asks for the presentation to be shared in written format. But again, all the parameters are outlined on the board for how to delegate the board if they so wish to have a voice at the table. And again, we're still keeping open our email address, and Mitch and Michelle run that, and then they farm out the questions to the BRC before the BSRC to answer that. So here we are. We will be again, the steering committee will meet, and we will then be drafting what we believe is three is the first choice of what the boundary committee is suggesting. 11 as another one they could consider, and we will present that to a notice to the affected community the week of February 20th. We bring that forward to our exec council with Director Ennis, and then March 1st and March 22nd, and then after that the decision is published to both school communities, and from there the planning department then looks at which students are moving, and we make those processes occur. So it's that way the principals will be involved in that integration committee and how that transition occurs. Families will be given a letter. They're automatically transferred over, so they don't have to go and register in those pieces, but they will be notified if their children are moving. And that's where we're at with that. If anybody has any questions.
I think from Mapleview, from the parent council we've had, I think started to plan or talk about, welcoming opportunities for new children and parents in the community to come to Mapleview, to meet teachers, to see the school, and we've already started, I think, planning in terms of social events and things like that. Start to open to the community, movie night, and some other things plan to integrate schools.
It's awesome. That's awesome. And I know
in terms of
both principals and school counselors are amazing people that sit there with a real passion and heart. And so they really, wrap around the whole community. And it is a neighborhood, so they're looking forward to making sure it can be as smooth as possible.
Mr. Breckles already showcased his empty classrooms last week.
Mr. Breckles shockingly was a graduate of Maplehurst, and he turned out okay. So
we're two other our family or parents council members also in school.
did they really?
Yeah.
There's a lot of parents.
So they have a lot of deep roots there,
Yeah.
right? So, and they turned out okay.
And relax.
Yeah.
Like, it's good.
Fair numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're always like, I went here, I had this teacher. I'm like, I love
and that makes the teacher feel so young.
Absolutely. Someone retired recently and they had multiple families. So,
Oh my goodness, that's the joy,
Yeah.
right? You know that it's a great place to go.
Absolutely, yeah.
And work. And I would like to thank you very much again, and I will turn it over to my co-chair, Dr. Tinelli, who will make a close statement for our group.
I just want to say thank you so much. This is one of the hardest decisions that comes to the trustee table, and we can't make a decision in good conscience without having heard from community reps such as yourself. So thank you very much. I know it's taken up a lot of meetings, and it's spilled over outside of these meetings. It's been a lot for you. So I just wanted to tell you how much it's been appreciated and how much better the decision will be because of the input that you had. So thank you very, very much.
And both principals echo that for the reps selected.
That's good. Thank you. Awesome.